I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I'm not the villain here, even though half the internet thinks I am. My face became a meme. My name trended for 3 days straight. Strangers sent me death threats. I lost my job, my reputation, and nearly lost my will to live. All because my own daughter decided to destroy me with a single screenshot. But here's what nobody knows. Here's what didn't make it into the viral posts or the think pieces or the outraged Twitter threads. My daughter didn't just betray me that day she posted those texts. She'd been planning it for months. And the texts everyone saw? They weren't even real. Not completely, anyway. I found out the truth 6 months too late, sitting in a lawyer's office with printed evidence of digital manipulation so sophisticated it would have made a hacker jealous. By then, I'd already lost everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. Back to when I still believed family meant something. Back to when I trusted my own blood more than anyone else in the world. Back to the last normal day of my life. The day before my daughter turned me into the most hated woman on the internet, and my name is Miranda, and up until 18 months ago, I had what I thought was a pretty decent life. Nothing fancy, but solid. I worked as a senior project manager at a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle. Good salary, decent benefits, the kind of job that let me sleep at night. I owned a small house in Ballard. Nothing spectacular, but it was mine. And I had my daughter, Sophie. Sophie was 23, fresh out of college with a communications degree and dreams bigger than the city itself. She wanted to be an influencer, which honestly I never fully understood, but I supported her anyway. That's what mothers do, right? I'd helped pay for her apartment when she moved to Capitol Hill, covered her car insurance, sent her money when she was short on rent. She was my only child. And after her father walked out when she was 6, it had always been just us against the world. Or so I thought. The thing about Sophie was that she'd always been, let's call it ambitious. Even as a kid, she had this hunger for attention that I chalked up to missing her father. She needed validation constantly. Every achievement had to be photographed, posted, celebrated publicly. By the time she hit high school, she was already cultivating an online presence, carefully curated Instagram posts, YouTube vlogs about her life, TikToks that occasionally got decent views. I encouraged it. God help me, I actually encouraged it. I thought it was harmless, creative even, a way for her to express herself and build confidence. I had no idea I was funding the weapon she'd eventually use to destroy me. The problem started small. Little lies, really. Sophie would tell her online followers these dramatic stories about her life, stories that were embellished. She'd post about struggling to pay rent while living on ramen and dreams, conveniently not mentioning the 500 quid I sent her every month. She'd share tearful videos about feeling abandoned, while I was literally texting her daily asking how she was doing. I noticed, but I didn't say much. I figured it was just part of the influencer persona, you know? Everyone exaggerates online. Everyone crafts a narrative. I didn't realize she was building something. A character. A victim character. And every good victim story needs a villain. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday in March. I'd gone over to Sophie's flat to drop off some groceries. She'd mentioned she was broke until her next freelance payment came through, so I'd picked up essentials. When I got there, I noticed something odd. Her apartment was full of new things. A ring light setup that must have cost 300 quid at least. A designer handbag on the counter, tags still attached. Boxes from online shopping stacked by the door. I asked her about it, casually, no accusation in my tone. Just curiosity. She got immediately defensive. Told me a friend had bought the ring light for her channel. Said the handbag was secondhand, practically free. Made me feel guilty for even questioning her. But something felt off. I couldn't shake it. So later that night, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked her Instagram. Really looked at it, scrolled through months of posts. The narrative she'd built was stunning in its completeness. According to her social media, she was a struggling creative with an unsupportive, emotionally distant mother who criticized her dreams and refused to help her. There were vague posts about toxic family dynamics and setting boundaries with people who don't believe in you. never naming me directly, but anyone who knew us would know exactly who she meant. The comments were always the same. Thousands of followers telling her how strong she was, how brave, how she deserved better. Telling her to cut off her toxic family. Praising her for surviving despite having no support system. I felt sick, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just how her generation processed things, publicly, dramatically, with their online communities as therapy. I should have trusted my gut. I should have seen what was coming. But I loved my daughter more than I loved my own sense of self-preservation, and that would turn out to be the biggest mistake of my life. The breaking point came 6 weeks later. Sophie called me crying. Real, gasping sobs. Said she was in trouble. Big trouble. She'd taken out a credit card to fund her content creation, thinking she'd start making money from sponsorship soon, but it hadn't happened. Now she was £8,000 in debt and couldn't make the minimum payments. She was terrified, desperate, begging me to help her. And I did. Of course I did. I transferred £5,000 from my savings account, money I'd been setting aside for a down payment on a better house. Told her I'd send another $3,000 the next month when I got my bonus. She cried with relief, thanked me over and over, told me I was saving her life. I felt good about it. Like I'd done the right thing. Like I was being the mother she needed. 3 days later, she posted a designer outfit haul on Instagram. 1,200 quid worth of clothes, easy. The caption was about finally investing in herself and knowing her worth. The comments were full of followers applauding her self-care and confidence. Nobody questioned where a supposedly broke girl got that kind of money. I called her immediately. The conversation got heated. I asked her directly, "Did you use the money I sent you to buy clothes?" She denied it, said she'd gotten a freelance payment I didn't know about, acted offended that I'd accuse her of lying. But her voice had that edge, that slippery quality I'd learned to recognize over the years. I pushed harder than I should have, told her I was tired of the lies, tired of the manipulation, tired of funding a lifestyle she couldn't afford while she painted me as the villain online. I told her she needed to grow up, get a real job, stop living in a fantasy world where internet strangers validated every bad decision she made. She went silent for a long moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You're going to regret talking to me like this." Not "I'm hurt," or "that's unfair." A threat. Clear as day. Then she hung up. I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. No texts, no calls, nothing. I figured she needed space to cool off. I had no idea she was spending those 2 weeks building the bomb that would obliterate my entire life. The morning it happened, I woke up to 73 missed calls. My phone was vibrating so aggressively it had fallen off my nightstand. Before I could even process what was happening, my boss was calling. Then my sister. Then people I hadn't spoken to in years. And every single message said the same thing. "Miranda, what the hell did you do?" I opened Twitter first. Mistake. I was trending. Number 3 in the United States. My full name, my face, my employer's name. The top tweet had been shared 40,000 times. It was a thread. A long, detailed thread posted by my daughter's account. The headline read, "My mother has been financially abusing me for years, and I finally have proof." Tet? My hands started shaking before I even started reading. Sophie had posted screenshots. Dozens of them. Text messages between us, supposedly showing a pattern of emotional manipulation and financial control. Me demanding money from her. Me threatening to cut her off if she didn't do what I wanted. Me calling her worthless, pathetic, a failure. Me saying I regretted having her. Except I'd never said any of those things. Never. The screenshots looked real. My number, my contact photo, the gray and blue text bubbles of our usual message thread. But the words were wrong. Horribly, viciously wrong. One showed me apparently demanding she pay me back every pound I'd ever spent on her, with interest, or I disown her. Another showed me calling her content creation, a pathetic cry for attention from a talentless disappointment. A third showed me saying I only helped her so I could control her, and that without me she'd be nothing. I felt like I was falling through the floor. This couldn't be real. These weren't real messages. But they looked so authentic. How could she have? Then I kept reading. Sophie's captions explained each screenshot. She talked about years of emotional abuse. How I'd used money as a weapon to control her. How I'd sabotaged her confidence and her dreams. How she'd finally found the courage to set boundaries, and I'd retaliated by sending her these vicious texts. The story was airtight, compelling, heartbreaking, and it was spreading like wildfire. The comments were a nightmare. Thousands of people calling me a monster, saying I deserved to lose everything, suggesting I should be investigated for abuse. Someone had already found my employer's contact information and was encouraging people to email them demanding I be fired. My work phone number was posted publicly. People were calling, leaving voicemails telling me I was scum, that I deserved to die. I tried calling Sophie. Straight to voicemail. I tried texting her. The messages showed as delivered, but never read. I sent her an email begging her to take the posts down, telling her those screenshots weren't real, asking her what the hell she was doing. Nothing. Then my boss called. The conversation was brief and brutal. The company couldn't be associated with this kind of controversy. I was being placed on immediate administrative leave while they investigated. He didn't ask if the allegations were true. The court of public opinion had already decided, and that was enough. I sat in my kitchen for 3 hours, numb, while my phone continued to explode. Friends texted asking if I was okay, but their messages had an edge of doubt. Family members called, confused and hurt. My sister eventually came over, and the look on her face when I answered the door told me everything. She'd seen the posts, and part of her believed them. Miranda, what actually happened? She asked. The fact that she had to ask destroyed me. I showed her my actual text history with Sophie. The real one on my phone. None of those vicious messages existed. Our actual conversations were normal. Mundane questions about her day, me asking if she needed anything, her thanking me for money I'd sent. Nothing cruel, nothing manipulative. But my sister looked skeptical. Could you have deleted them? She asked quietly. That's when I realized the genius of what Sophie had done. By striking first, by controlling the narrative, she'd made it impossible for me to defend myself. Anything I said looked like denial. Any evidence I provided looked doctored. She'd weaponized the internet's default setting, believe the victim first, ask questions later. I spent that entire day trying to figure out how she'd created those fake screenshots. It wasn't until I went down a rabbit hole of Reddit threads and YouTube tutorials that I understood. There are apps. Actual apps you can download that let you create completely fake text message conversations. You can customize everything, the contact name, the photo, the timestamps, even the battery percentage and signal strength in the top corner. They look absolutely real. And she'd used one to forge an entire history of abuse that never happened. By the end of the first day, I'd lost my job. Not suspended, fired. They didn't even wait for an investigation. The PR risk was too high, they said. I'd been with that company for 8 years. By the end of the second day, local news outlets were picking up the story. Tech worker accused of financial abuse by daughter ran on 3 different websites. They used my LinkedIn photo. Suddenly, I wasn't just Twitter famous, I was real-world infamous. By the end of the first week, I'd become a case study. Think pieces were being written about financial abuse in families. Screenshots of Sophie's thread were being used in social media call-out posts about toxic parents. Someone made a TikTok breaking down the warning signs from our relationship. It had 4 million views. And Sophie? She was thriving. Her follower count had exploded. She was getting interview requests from podcasts and online magazines. She'd positioned herself as a brave survivor speaking truth to power, and the internet had crowned her a hero. I tried to fight back at first. I posted my own statement on Facebook, explaining that the screenshots were fabricated, that I'd never sent those messages. I even posted screen recordings of our actual text history. The response was vicious. I was accused of gaslighting, of being a textbook abuser trying to discredit my victim. People pointed out that of course I'd delete the real messages and fake a clean history. Some suggested I was too tech-savvy for my own good, Working in tech meant I could manipulate digital evidence easily, right? Everything I did to prove my innocence was used as further proof of my guilt. IT was 2 weeks into this nightmare when I got the first clue that Sophie hadn't done this alone. I was scrolling through her Instagram, torturing myself as I watched her give an interview to some online women's magazine, when I noticed something in the background of one of her recent photos. A laptop screen, partially visible, showing what looked like a messaging app. But it wasn't our text thread. It was something else. A group chat. And one of the names visible made my blood run cold. Project Takedown. I zoomed in until the image pixelated. I could just make out fragments of messages. Phase 3 ready. Screenshots looking perfect. She won't see it coming. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a daughter having an emotional breakdown and lashing out. This was planned, coordinated, premeditated.
But why?
And who else was involved? I hired a lawyer. Cost me £3,000 I couldn't afford for the initial consultation, but I was desperate. I brought everything. My phone records, screenshots of our real conversations, the timeline of events, that Instagram photo showing the group chat. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Chin, listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and asked me one question. Do you have any idea who might want to destroy you? I didn't. That was the thing that kept me up at night. I wasn't a controversial person. I didn't have enemies. I'd lived a quiet, unremarkable life. Who would go to these lengths? Rebecca suggested we hire a digital forensics expert. Someone who could examine the fake screenshots, trace their origin, maybe even recover deleted social media posts or messages that would prove coordination. It would cost money, a lot of money, but it might be my only shot at clearing my name. I took out a loan against my house. What choice did I have? The forensics expert was a guy named Dmitry, early 30s, Russian accent, the kind of person who existed entirely behind screens. He took one look at Sophie's posted screenshots and immediately spotted inconsistencies I'd missed. The kerning on the text was slightly off. The blue color of the iMessage bubbles was a shade too dark. The metadata embedded in the images showed they'd been created using an app called TextArt Pro, not actually photographed from a real phone screen. This is amateur work, he said, almost dismissively. Good enough to fool regular people, but not a professional. Your daughter didn't do this alone. Someone taught her how, or did it for her. He started digging, and what he found made everything so much worse. The group chat I glimpsed in that Instagram photo, he tracked it. It was on Discord, a private server with 4 members. Sophie was one. The other 3 used pseudonyms, but Dmitry was able to trace their IP addresses and cross-reference them with Sophie's social media followers and friends lists. One was Sophie's boyfriend, Marcus. A guy I'd met exactly twice, who'd seemed polite but distant. Turns out he ran a YouTube channel about exposing toxic people and had a decent following. He'd been encouraging Sophie to monetize her story for months. The second was a girl named Tasha, Sophie's former roommate. I'd lent her 500 quid once when she was short on rent and never asked for it back. Apparently, she'd told Sophie I was condescending about it. The third name made me physically ill. My ex-husband. Sophie's father. The man who'd abandoned us when she was 6, who'd paid minimal child support and made minimal effort, who'd missed birthdays and graduations and every important moment of her life. He'd been in contact with Sophie for over a year, and together they'd planned this. Every screenshot, every post, every viral moment. They'd crafted it like a marketing campaign because that's exactly what it was. Destroy me publicly, build Sophie's platform on the ashes, and potentially set up a lawsuit against me that my ex could benefit from financially. He'd apparently suggested that if Sophie could prove a pattern of abuse, she could sue me for emotional damages. They'd turn my destruction into a business opportunity. The Discord logs were damning. Detailed plans for how to time the posts for maximum viral impact. Discussions about which screenshots would be most believable. Debates about whether to include fake photos or stick with text only. Marcus suggesting they create a GoFundMe for Sophie's trauma therapy after the posts went viral. They'd even planned follow-up content, Sophie was supposed to do a series of videos about recovering from parental abuse, maybe write a Medium article, possibly get booked on a podcast circuit. I'd been absolutely right. I wasn't the villain in my daughter's story. I was the product. The content. The villain character they'd created to launch her influencer career into the stratosphere. And it had worked. In the 3 weeks since the posts went viral, Sophie had gained 200,000 followers. She'd received sponsorship offers. A literary agent had reached out about a potential book deal. She'd sold me out for fame. With the help of her deadbeat father, a clout-chasing boyfriend, and a bitter ex-friend, she destroyed my entire life to boost her online presence. Rebecca, my lawyer, looked at the evidence Dimitri had compiled and smiled for the first time since I'd met her. "This is good," she said. "This is very, very good. We can work with this." We filed a defamation lawsuit. Not just against Sophie, but against all 4 conspirators. Rebecca was confident. The evidence was airtight. The damage to my life was documented and severe, and we could prove malicious intent. But here's what they don't tell you about lawsuits. They take time. Months, sometimes years. And in the meantime, I still had to live with the consequences that I was buying groceries when someone recognized me. A woman in her 40s, pushing a cart full of organic produce, stopped dead when she saw me in the cereal aisle. Her face went from confusion to recognition to absolute disgust in about 3 seconds. Then she pulled out her phone and started filming me. "This is her," she said to the camera. The abusive mom from Twitter. Shopping like nothing happened. Like she didn't torture her daughter. I left my cart there and walked out. I couldn't even buy food without being harassed. That's when I realized, even if I won in court, I'd already lost everything that mattered. The legal process ground forward with agonizing slowness. Discovery, depositions, motion hearings. Rebecca was brilliant, but even brilliance couldn't speed up the justice system. In the meantime, my life existed in a bizarre limbo. I couldn't get another job in my field. Every potential employer Googled my name and found the viral posts. My savings evaporated paying legal fees and basic living expenses. I had to sell my house, the one thing I'd worked so hard for, just to stay afloat. I moved into a tiny studio apartment in a part of the city where nobody recognized me. The harassment continued in waves. Every few weeks, someone would resurface the original posts, and I'd get a fresh batch of death threats and hate mail. My sister stood by me, as did a handful of close friends who'd known me long enough to know the truth. But most people? They'd made up their minds. I was the villain. Nothing would change that. Sophie, meanwhile, continued to thrive. She landed a partnership with a mental health app company. She started doing speaking engagements about setting boundaries with toxic family members. She was building an entire brand on the foundation of my destroyed reputation. The sickest part? I still loved her. Even knowing what she'd done, what she'd planned, how deliberately she'd destroyed me. Some part of me still saw her as my little girl. The child I'd raised alone, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally. That's the thing about being a parent. The love doesn't just switch off, even when it should. The deposition was the worst day of the entire ordeal. I had to sit across a conference table from Sophie, with lawyers and a court reporter present, and answer questions while she stared at me with complete indifference. Like I was a stranger. Like she hadn't spent 23 years as the center of my entire world. They asked her about the fake screenshots. She claimed she'd felt they represented the emotional truth of our relationship, even if the specific words weren't accurate. Said she'd been manipulated by Marcus and my ex-husband, that she'd been in a fragile emotional state. It was a good strategy, actually. Shift the blame. Play the victim twice over. Now, she wasn't just a survivor of my abuse. She was a survivor of being manipulated into fighting back inappropriately. They asked about the Discord server. She said she barely remembered those conversations, that she'd been drinking a lot during that period, that the planning had mostly been done by the others. None of it was her idea, she claimed. She'd just been a traumatized daughter who got taken advantage of by people with agendas. Watching her lie so smoothly, so convincingly, I barely recognized her. When they deposed my ex-husband, he crumbled faster. Couldn't keep his story straight. contradicted himself multiple times, eventually admitted to most of the planning. Turned out he'd been gambling heavily and was deep in debt. He genuinely hoped to profit from a potential lawsuit against me. Marcus similarly fell apart under questioning, admitting he'd seen the situation as a content opportunity for both his and Sophie's channels. But Sophie held firm, maintained her victim narrative even as the evidence mounted against her. Cried on cue when asked about our relationship. Said she'd been desperate and scared and made bad choices, but that didn't erase the underlying truth of my mistreatment. Her lawyer was good. Not as good as Rebecca, but good enough to muddy the waters. The settlement offer came 11 months after I filed the lawsuit. Sophie's lawyer wanted to negotiate. They'd pay me £175,000, enough to cover my legal fees and some of the income I'd lost, though nowhere near enough to repair the damage to my reputation. In exchange, I'd have to sign an NDA. Couldn't talk about the case, couldn't share the evidence of the conspiracy, couldn't tell my side of the story publicly. They'd issue a joint statement saying we'd resolved our differences privately and were focusing on healing. Sophie wouldn't have to admit to anything. She'd get to keep her followers, her sponsorships, her victim brand. And I'd have to disappear quietly into the background of her origin story. Rebecca looked at me across her desk, exhausted after nearly a year of fighting. "It's not justice," she said, "but it might be the best we can realistically get. A trial is risky. Juries are unpredictable, especially when social media is involved. And even if we win, collecting damages from 4 people who don't have much money is nearly impossible. This at least gives you something." I thought about it for 3 days. In the end, I didn't take the settlement. I know that sounds insane. I was broke, exhausted, destroyed. Taking the money was the rational choice. But something in me refused to let them win that completely. Refused to sign away my right to the truth in exchange for their hush money. We went to trial. The trial lasted 6 days. Rebecca presented the forensic evidence, the Discord logs, testimony from Dimitri about the fake screenshots. She built an airtight case proving conspiracy, malicious intent, and devastating damages to my life and career. Sophie's lawyer played the emotion card hard. Put Sophie on the stand where she cried beautifully and talked about her difficult childhood with an absent father and an overbearing mother. Suggested that even if the execution was flawed, her pain was real. Implied that I was a powerful woman weaponizing the legal system against my traumatized daughter. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They found in my favor. Awarded me £340,000 in damages, plus legal fees. Found Sophie, Marcus, and my ex-husband all jointly liable for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I won. But it felt hollow. Because here's what actually happened after the verdict. The story barely made the news. A few small legal blogs covered it, some local outlets ran brief stories. But it didn't go viral. It didn't trend. There was no massive wave of people apologizing for harassing me or admitting they'd been wrong. The original posts were still up. Sophie had never deleted them. They had millions of views, tens of thousands of shares. My victory had maybe 50,000 people see it. The lie had spread so far and so fast that the truth couldn't catch up. Sophie filed for bankruptcy 3 months after the verdict, claiming she couldn't pay the judgment. She'd spent all her sponsorship money, and then some. Turns out influencer income is volatile, and she'd been living well beyond her means. The bankruptcy meant I'd likely never collect most of what I was owed. But here's the twisted part. The bankruptcy itself became content for her. She posted about it, about being persecuted by the legal system, about powerful people trying to silence survivors, about the financial abuse continuing even after she'd spoken out. Her followers rallied around her, started a GoFundMe to help with her legal debts, raised £60,000 in 2 weeks. She'd monetized her own consequences. My ex-husband disappeared, skipped town before anyone could collect from him. Marcus paid about £5,000 and then also filed for bankruptcy. Tasha was the only one who actually paid her portion. She'd come from money. Couldn't get out of it. But even then, it was less than 20 grand after lawyer negotiations. I got a fraction of what I was owed. And it didn't matter anyway because the damage was permanent. I never got my job back. Never worked in my field again. Ended up taking a remote position doing freelance project management for a company based in another country where nobody knew my name or face. The pay was half what I'd made before. I lost most of my friends. The harassment died down eventually, but every few months someone would stumble across the old posts, and the whole thing would flare up again. I changed my phone number 4 times. Deleted all my social media accounts. Learned to live like a ghost. And Sophie? She's still out there, still posting, still building her brand on the ashes of my life. Her follower count dropped a bit after the trial, but not much. She pivoted her content, focused more on mental health and complex family dynamics and the nuance of intergenerational trauma. Got even more sophisticated in her victim narrative. We haven't spoken in over 2 years. I have no idea if she feels any remorse. Based on her content, I'd guess not. She's fully committed to the character she created, the brave survivor of a toxic upbringing. Maybe she's even convinced herself it's true. Memory is a funny thing. Tell yourself a story enough times, and it becomes real. I did get one message from her about 6 months ago. Just 2 sentences. I hope you're healing. Maybe someday we can rebuild. I never responded. What would I even say? Someday she'll have children of her own, and maybe then she'll understand what she did. Or maybe she won't. Maybe she'll be the kind of mother who posts every moment of their lives online, who turns their childhood into content, who teaches them that love is transactional and family is just another audience to perform for. I hope not, for their sake. But I'll never know. That's not my life anymore. The lawyers tell me I should write a book. That my story could help other people who've been destroyed by viral lies, who've been the villain in someone else's narrative for profit. But honestly,
I'm tired.
I'm so tired of the whole thing. Here's what I learned, though. What I need you to understand if you take anything from this. Social media isn't real life, but it has real consequences. A lie can circle the globe before the truth gets its shoes on, and by the time you catch up, nobody cares anymore. They've moved on to the next outrage, the next villain, the next viral moment. Family can betray you worse than any stranger because they know exactly where to aim the knife. They know your vulnerabilities, your fears, your weaknesses. And if they decide to weaponize that knowledge, there's almost nothing you can do to defend yourself. The justice system can vindicate you, and it still won't matter. I won in court. I proved everything. And I still lost, because winning in court doesn't undo the damage of losing in the court of public opinion. And here's the hardest lesson. Sometimes the people you love most are capable of destroying you without a second thought. Sometimes your own child can look at you and see nothing but a stepping stone to fame. Sometimes blood means nothing when there's clout to be gained. I don't have a happy ending for you. I'm not reconciled with my daughter. I didn't get my life back. I didn't even get paid properly. I live quietly now in obscurity, under a name that's not quite mine, doing work that nobody notices, existing in the margins of a digital world that chewed me up and spit me out. But I survived. That's something. I wake up every morning and I'm still here. Still breathing. Still fighting in my own quiet way. And every once in a while, late at night when I can't sleep, I scroll through Sophie's Instagram. Watch her perform her life for her followers. See her carefully curated posts about authenticity and healing and growth. And I wonder if she ever thinks about me. If she ever regrets it. If somewhere in the middle of a sponsored post or a heartfelt caption or a therapeutic TikTok, she remembers that I'm real. That I was real. That I loved her more than anything, and she turned that love into a weapon and destroyed me with it. Probably not. That's not very good content, is it?
So yeah,
that's my story. The one you didn't see on Twitter. The one that didn't trend. The truth that nobody cared about because it wasn't as interesting as the lie. My daughter posted my private texts online, except they weren't really my texts and they weren't really private, and the whole thing was a calculated betrayal engineered for people who saw me as an obstacle to be removed. And I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my savings, my home, my relationship with my only child, and very nearly my sanity. But not my life. They didn't take that. And as long as I'm still breathing, I get to keep telling my truth, even if nobody's listening. Even if it doesn't matter. Even if she never cares. I'm still here. And that's going to have to be enough. More stories are waiting under the telling tree. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back for the next one.